Let's talk pelvis. Let's talk about how the pelvis should move through its journey of the golf swing. Let's look at backswing, transition, and through swing really to give us the ultimate pelvis look for what we want in the golf swing. So what I ideally want to see is when we swing back is this pelvis is going to move from slightly left hip high, right hip low, to basically rotate, and it works in what I would call into a depth move. So it moves backwards and upwards. Now if you think of it from your knees point of view, your knees are going to be moving down and up the same amount. So depending on how flexible you are, depends how much your knees will need to move and how much your hips need to move. But if we looked at 45 degrees as a good number for the hips or the pelvis. So we want this pelvis to move like that. So how that looks from behind is the right glute is working in and back, the right knee works in and back. We don't want to see this kind of bracing action and swaying action. It's very much a pelvis. The knees move up and down the same amount. The pelvis moves up and back. Then in transition, there's going to be definitely a lateral move forward. The right hip at this stage is higher than the left hip. And as we move laterally, the right hip starts to move back level, then lower. And obviously it's going to be working again, more again, in and up this way. So again, the pelvis works in, up and around. And ideally then we want to be posting the hip up like this. So the pelvis will elevate up and forward. And that pelvis action of kind of going right hip up, kind of almost like, let's call it a leveling action as we move laterally. There's a subtle recentering in terms of rotationally. Then there's a push with more rotation, and then an extension up, and the elevation and raise up is important, and the rate of all these things is also important. What I tend to see with a lot of golfers is they'll tend to brace on the way back and then sit back on the way down, and what that causes is a lot of top issues, fat issues, thin issues, and obviously if my plane's moving this way, I'm sitting back and I'm getting that kind of path. So we want to try and feel that if the club's moving correctly, that's the kind of action we want, and the rotation is mostly through the hitting zone. So that one felt great. So I'm really there trying to feel that I want the end position to be right. So in the backswing, I'm trying to feel I get that kind of hip turn that's deep, no sway. And in the through swing, it's a push up. And I'm trying to keep my torso behind. So the torso behind that finish position of the hips. So it's definitely an easy concept to think about how the pelvis or how the body finishes the golf swing. So using big parts to move is real help to get the rest of the swing flowing and following. And if we can get yourself into that finish position with that pelvis correctly, you will control that club much better through the golf ball, and you control the club face and control the strike, and then the sequence will also be better too.